Hello, welcome to the CIRS Healing Collective expert guest video series. I'm Jenny Johnson, the host and facilitator of the CIRS Healing Collective, which has been a resource for aspiring CIRS overcomers to share and connect from around the world since 2020. I'm a shoemaker proficiency partner and CIRS coach, and most importantly, an overcomer myself. What you're about to see is a 10-minute excerpt from a 90-minute group discussion that members of the CIRS Healing Collective got to have live with this expert guest. If you would like to see the full 90-minute replay, come on over to the CIRS Healing Collective. We have a robust video library from the past 5 or 6 years of so many expert guests. Better yet, you'll be able to join our future monthly live discussions with experts to come. We'd love to have you.
Okay, so some of the causes, environmental toxins, just like they're inflammatory to everything, they're also inflammatory for your bones. Medications, like there are certain medications that actually, any of the corticosteroids, anything, also will can impact osteoporosis. Also, medications, proton pump inhibitors, which a lot of people are on. That's the Nexium, that's the things for acid reflux. Those have a significant, they reduce acid in the stomach, and they've shown a huge correlation with bone loss. Gut dysbiosis, which I know you talk about so much, anything going on in the gut, if we're not absorbing, if there's inflammation, or if just the combination of bacteria is such that it's inflammatory, any kind of inflammation. I mean, this is what can affect the bones. Stress, hormones, this is huge in this population. Not just celiac disease, we know that, but people who have issues with gluten. And there was a Dr. Wright who looked at, he was actually looking at and that's not right, but anyway, there's a very high, most of the people I've asked in my summit, like the majority of their people have issues with gluten. So gluten sensitivity seems to be a big issue. Micronutrient deficiency, if people aren't getting their micronutrients. Excessive alcohol, usually it's more than like 2 drinks, and any kind of autoimmune disorder can cause osteoporosis.
Wow. This is a really this is a big list. I'm looking at hormones in the middle there. Can you say a little bit more about that one? Is there a certain imbalance of hormones that is particularly concerning, or what about hormones?
It's mostly for women. I mean, most women, hormones are a big deal. Then that's when there's the greatest loss of bone is right at menopause. I mean, you can lose 1 to 3% or 2% of your bone per year. So you could have between the perimenopause and postmenopause, you can have a lot of bone loss during that period of time. So that's why I'm such a believer in working with you can work on your hormones because it can be prevented. And for certain people, if they're going through it at that point in time, you can really prevent bone loss because that's a loss of it. But even things like the cortisol and the stress hormone, so estrogen has a protective effect on the bone. So when we don't have the estrogen, we tend to have bone loss.
I think this will be helpful because that really was my next question. What are some of the examples of things that impact our bone health for good or for bad? And how do we know if we have them? Like, what are we testing for? So I think this is perfect.
Yeah, so this is just something in your regular blood work. That's what's so great.
Okay.
And this is something I have to tell you. So there's 2 markers that I like people to look at when you're getting your blood work and look at your own blood work because this one's really missed and it's very upsetting. Let's start with that. So the total serum calcium that is in your blood. Now, that doesn't mean the calcium you're getting in your food. Your blood has a certain calcium it needs because so many systems in the body need calcium. And if your blood is going to regulate that, so your blood will take it from your bones. So this doesn't mean that your bones are great or anything. But if there's a number that is too high, something is going wrong. And usually it's parathyroid issue. So it means the parathyroid glands are working, or there's usually a tumor in the parathyroid glands. And this may sound crazy, but the problem is, so the point is if you're over 50, if you're over 40, okay, you want your numbers to be in the 9s.
So we want it to be in the 9s. Too low and too high could mean problems for our bones.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
If we see it in the 10s, that's the main issue. Okay. The next thing is blood sugar. And I know this is something that you talk about, but this is a very, very big deal. People think, oh, no big deal. But what happens if there's too much blood glucose, it increases inflammation. So it stimulates those cells to break down the bone.
Can you spend a few minutes explaining why toxins and inflammation, how those things impact our bone health? So we really have that.
Yeah, let me backtrack in terms of what happens with the
Okay.
bones. As I said, there are cells that are called osteoclasts that break down bone. So there's something called bone turnover, where we don't have the same bone that we did, same bone that we did when we were born. We have bone breaking down bone, so it gets rid of old fragments, it gets rid of things. So these cells that dig in, called osteoclasts, and they dig, and then there's new cells, osteoblasts. So we like to have a nice balance. What happens with chronic inflammation, it increases the osteoclast in proportionately. We get an increase. So we're having more digging, more bone loss than we're having bone produced. So it's an increase in these
Right.
osteoclasts. That's the big
Okay.
issue that usually typically happens, causing the bone loss.
So, Margie, a lot of us here, because of this chronic inflammatory response syndrome that we know we have inflammation, which puts us at risk for bone loss. But we also have this exercise intolerance that I talked about. A lot of it is due to poor oxygenation to tissues, poor recovery. We tend to have body pain, headaches, dizziness, all kinds of things that really make it challenging to exercise. So, in my mind, as a physical therapist, I think, oh, well, to keep your bone density up, we need to be doing weight bearing exercises and up and moving. But that's not always realistic for people with this chronic fatiguing illness, or maybe it's just short little windows. I'm wondering if you can tell us what are some of the body-based strategies that we can use to enhance bone health for our population, and then maybe some other things like you mentioned stress management and things like that. Help us get an appreciation for what we can do to protect our bones given low energy.
Yeah, I think the key is to know if we have low energy, we want to make sure what we do is the most effective, first of all.
Right.
So we want to sort of learn, well, what is it that is helping bone? So
Right.
what they found, well, even before that, let me even backtrack. We,
Okay.
we don't want to fracture, right?
Mhm.
Regardless of what, if we're living our life and our bone density isn't great, but we have good balance and we're not fracturing, that is absolutely key. So,
Mhm.
balance to me is something that we can do pretty easily. It's something you can do. There's a couple things. I mean, even standing on one foot, stabilizing belly button in and up, even for like, whatever it is, or even standing, the simplest thing, standing with one foot in front of another on a narrow support. Um, I'll,
Like a balance beam kind of thing. Yeah.
balance. If we can even, that's why I love Qigong. Simple. Shifting weight forward and back. Shifting weight sideways. They've done all sorts of studies on
Mhm.
balance, and the most effective is Qigong because people practice that. So that's we can do that with
Yeah.
1 minute. You can do that whatever you want.
Yeah.
So anything's is
Cool.
important. So it's
Yeah.
resistance training, and you can start without the weights and then gradually increase weights, and it's not a lot of repetitions. That's the thing. So if you do fatigue, you can do 5 repetitions.
And is there a certain amount of time per day
What
that
they
you would
find
recommend?
now, they used to say, just 10 minimum. Minimum is what I do. I do 10 minutes a day. But ideally, they think twice a day, 10 minutes each time, if you could. If not,
Okay.
you can even do 5 minutes. But ideally, 10 minutes twice a day is ideal.
All right. To protect our bones and just to kind of level up our fitness, our physical fitness in general, as we are going through CIRS, we've got to get to the root cause of our inflammation. So for most of us, that's dealing with our water damage building exposure, detoxing, following our clinician with that whole protocol of reducing our inflammation. Oops, there. So of course we've got that. If we've got blood glucose dysregulations, we need to look at that because that's also contributes to poor bone density and a lot of other things. So blood glucose. If we're really stressed, oh my, okay. So nervous system, we talk a lot about the nervous system and how the nervous system and the immune system are connected. We're able to get a better balanced immune system when we're managing our stress better, but it's also better for our fitness and our bones. So there we go. Diet, we didn't talk a lot about that. I just heard you say, protein and leafy greens, an anti-inflammatory diet. We've talked about that before. I think you guys are all pretty good with diet, but what Margie just shared with us is some really great supplements. I'm not going to list all of them, but we can maybe do that in some show notes or something, give you kind of a takeaway of some of the things that Margie listed, some supplements that can really help in addition to a healthy diet. And then fitness according to where we are. So balance is going to help to prevent a fall, and it's going to help all of us. Like it's going to empower us with just more capability to move safely and independently. So things like Qigong is great. Resistance exercises. So when our muscles pull on our bones, that increases density. So within whatever our limit is, just like little no weights or light weights, or sliding against a wall, or even lying down, lifting legs, whatever we can do against gravity. And then what was the third fitness thing? So we had the
Impact.
balance impact.
Impact.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, a lot of us are kind of bouncing on a rebounder. Would that count as impact, or does
Yeah,
it need
they
to be
did
more
one
like the
study. No,
marching?
no, no. They did one study, and they did show, and again, these people for 45 minutes doing a class on the rebounder, but it
Yeah.
did show improvement in bone density.
Yeah.